Hi, Dr. Mary Elder with 4 Points Family Chiropractic here. Welcome to one of our Facebook Lives here. The purpose of these is to give you some strategies that you can use in your day-to-day life to just get better, have longevity, really just the best life that you can. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today briefly is generally mental health. And how it impacts our wellness. You know, we pay really close attention to physical and neurological health in our office, and it's what we often discuss most with our patients. And we really talk a lot about the concept of making sure your body, your spine, your neurology can last you for a lifetime. And an optimal lifetime, one where you get to enjoy your time, your family, your hobbies, all of the things that you like to do. But often we find that people aren't thinking very much about their mental longevity as well. We think about the brain as an organ, but not necessarily as our consciousness. And it has such a huge trickle-down effect on our overall health. When we talk about setting physical goals, it's kind of the things that you're used to thinking about, things like your cardiac health, your stamina. You know, we recommend that people do strength training so that their muscles and joints last them a long time. Your flexibility, that's a huge indicator of how well you're going to age. But we don't really talk about setting mental health goals. And I don't mean like not being anxious. Everybody's going to have anxiety in some way, shape, or form at some point in their life. That's just part of being alive. But I mean more like set goals for yourself. If something stressful happens at work, you don't lay awake at night and think about it. You can integrate stressful things or sad things into your life and kind of move forward in a way that's purposeful and intentional and not have like dragged out physical effects because of it. Because really your mental health has such huge trickle-down effects on your physical health. And we don't always put those two things together. I do find it helpful with this discussion to remind people that humans are very much creatures of habit. So again, we talk about this with our patients a lot. People build physical habits, like maybe you always sleep in the same position. When you drive in the car, you lean one direction and you kind of have to put intentional focus into getting back to midline. Maybe you sit with your legs crossed a lot, but we also build mental habits. They're like grooves in a record that we just repeat and repeat and repeat, not always understanding that we're doing something to ourselves. Why on earth does a chiropractor even care about this? Because when we are treating you as a person, we're treating you physically, neurologically, and we see a lot of this kind of trickle down into your health. You'll often hear us discuss the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic nervous system. We're really big on making sure that people understand what that is because you have so much control over switching between the two of them if you're conscious about it. So your parasympathetic nervous system, that state, that's where we should be most of the time. It's where our body is relaxed, we're digesting well, it's our main operating system. The sympathetic nervous system is what you're probably more commonly going to hear called your fight or flight. So this is where our body and our mind think it's under attack in some way, shape, or form, and it's reacting to that. And we have very clear physical effects that have been demonstrated in the research with that. When you're in a sympathetic state, you have high cortisol levels, your digestion's not working, your immune system's compromised, your clotting factor goes up, there's cardiac stress, all of these things that are okay for short periods of time. If you're in a stressful environment, you need to get out of it quickly. I mean, if you're on a hike and you fall down a cliff, you should be in a sympathetic state, but not if your phone rings. That shouldn't cause a sympathetic state, but we kind of react to them in the same way depending on where your mental health is. People might not even realize that they're in a sympathetic state a lot of the time, even if you're aware of the parasympathetic-sympathetic complex. Some people don't realize that they're living in a sympathetic state for long periods of time and what that effect is on their body. So being aware of that is something really, really important. So you can see how your wellness overall is really compromised by your mental health or built up by it, depending. Clinically, when we see patients who are obviously in a sympathetic state, we can assist them by stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system. So even though we aren't mental health professionals, we can play a very small part in making sure that people have a good, strong base for solid mental health. So if you know somebody that's in fight or flight or has any sort of high, quick reactive to stress environments, they're probably in a sympathetic state. And if you think that they want to explore that more, they need more help or need to be assessed, they can actually reach out to our office at 512-345-9355. If they mention this Facebook Live or the word parasympathetic, they can get the full exam, including a neurological exam, determination of their parasympathetic state, any necessary x-rays. It's about a $345 value, but they can get it for $67 if they mention this Facebook Live. We can help assess them, talk about if there's any way for us to help switch them back into a parasympathetic state. Now, the habits to start to really be building strong foundations for mental health is to figure out your habits. So I'm going to be talking about that word a lot here in the next few minutes or so. This work comes out of some work by Dr. Paul Conti, and I love this metaphor for mental health. If you consider an iceberg, 10% of it is above water, 90% of it is below the water. So that 10%, if you think about your mind this way, 10% of it is your conscious mind. So we're aware of things, we're thinking about things, we're making decisions. 90% of it is your subconscious thought. So it's informing your conscious thought, but you might not be aware of it. And these are those grooves and patterns and habits that we're used to. So those decisions and reactions have patterns, and those patterns are what we want to try to change. And even just observing and identifying those habits and patterns is really, really powerful, because it gives you an awareness of what's going on so that you can move forward and change them in any way that you choose to. Again, I'm not a mental health professional, so I can't tell you why those patterns exist, but we can give you some habits, some things to use that you can change them. So examples I see a lot are easy things that seem really simple. Maybe when you're stressed, you reach for sugar. I hear that one a lot. Maybe when you're bored, you get on TikTok and you just scroll. It's just like a mindless thing. We call it doom scrolling. Maybe when you're winding down at night, you're laying in bed, you should be going to sleep, and instead you decide to open the news and watch the news. And it just amps you back up again because the world is stressful and what's on the news is just hard. So that's not really the time to be doing it. These patterns are building something called neuroplasticity. If you walk away with no other concept from these next few minutes, remember the term neuroplasticity. The neurons that fire together wire together. So when you are doing things in a repetitive way, you're building a neuroplastic pattern that's going to keep going. So your job is to identify them, interrupt them, and rewire them. And that takes time. And if you're intentional about it, it's not actually that hard. It's just a time thing. So be aware of how you're wiring your brain. You have to be conscious about it. Maybe you look for patterns that are healthier. So if you are one of those people that opens the news at night because you're bored, replace it with gratitude meditation. Something like that. If you are somebody that reaches for sugar, have that pattern in mind when you go grocery shopping or when you make your list. Don't let sugar come into the house. Don't do that to yourself. You're setting yourself up for failure once you're in that stressful situation where your subconscious brain kind of takes over, that groove gets run. If you are somebody who has dinner, gets online and scrolls social media for 20 minutes, but really it turns into an hour. Set an alarm on your phone so you don't go for longer than that. If you know you're somebody who's going to ignore that alarm and dismiss it, that's me. Just don't even do it. Get out and go for a walk instead. Just leave the phone, put the phone down. Don't think this, and there's a great point Dr. Tara Swart makes about, don't think of these patterns necessarily as good or bad. Think of them as productive and non-productive. And I like that distinction because then there's no morality associated with it. If it's productive, then it's something that you can build that pattern around. If it's non-productive, let it go. Try and figure out a way way to not be using it so much. And it's cyclical because when you're in a stress state, the sustained cortisol in your body affects your entire body, but also a particular part of your brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is part of your limbic system, meaning it's how we respond to stress. Now, the amygdala, when it senses sustained cortisol levels, it'll actually bring up memories of stress and failure in your brain to encourage you to not do something because it's trying to protect you. So then you're kind of in like a cycle of, uh-oh, I shouldn't do that, I shouldn't try. It also, when there's sustained cortisol levels in your body, lowers the blood flow to your brain. Now, if your brain is not getting enough blood flow, it doesn't really care what else is going on. It's going to put you into survival mode, and you're not going to get blood flow, nutrients, and engagement in the part of your brain that's responsible for things like collaboration, creativity, advanced thought, logic, reasoning. So you can see how a stressed state, your mental health will kind of have a trickle-down effect in your career as well, because you're not being able to collaborate, reach out, make those connections that might make you more of an asset in your everyday life. So examine and intentionally rewire these habits. Definitely worth it to consider doing. I also want to recommend that you sleep intentionally. Your sleep is for healing and repair. So what your brain does when you sleep is it integrates your memories from the day before and it preps you for the day moving forward. A lot of us aren't getting enough sleep, right? There's not enough time. We're cutting it short. We're looking at blue light ahead of time, so we're not really getting into that good deep sleep, or we're stressing ourselves out both before and after sleep. If you set a loud alarm on your phone and you open it and the first thing you do is check your emails, assume you're not getting good rest because your brain's already prepping for that as you go into your day. So just try to control your input before and after sleep. Make sleep sacred is what I'm trying to say. Make sure you're getting exercise. I know that sounds like a basic, but it can be a variety of different things. We encourage resistance training. It's good for your spinal health, your muscle health. It's good for your aging process. But anything that gets oxygen to your brain helps with that new neuroplasticity. So if you're really trying to build new neural patterns, get out and get walking, get exercise, cardio, resistance, anything, yoga. All of that helps get blood to the areas of your brain that need it, and you'll build more of a memory. Remember that this wiring does take time and effort. The longer these pathways have existed in your brain, the more powerful they are, and the more likely you don't even know they exist. So this is where the help of a professional counselor sometimes is very, very important, because they might be able to help you identify habits that you haven't realized. Your loved ones or friends might notice some habits that you've developed and you might not even know they exist, but it's really, really good to have awareness of them, and you can deal with them now or later, you pick. You can also regulate your nervous system from bottom up by stimulating your vagus nerve. So vagal tone, your vagus nerve, is how you stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system. Deep diaphragmatic breathing is a big, big part of that, where a lot of us aren't breathing properly. Ooh, I'll have to read that book, Jennifer. Thank you. That looks good. The deep breathing helps. So does humming, actually. If you hum, you stimulate your vagus nerve from the glottopharyngeal nerve, and that'll actually calm you down also, which is why you'll often hear people say that they feel calmer after singing. You can do that. Just humming quietly to yourself is a way to stimulate that nerve. But vagal tone, that's what we, as chiropractors, that's what we work with most with our patients, because that vagal tone we can stimulate by adjusting certain parts of the spine. So again, if this is something that you think somebody in your life needs to be assessed for, they can reach out to our office at 512-345-9355 and mention parasympathetic and get assessed for that, whether it's through our neural readings, our x-ray, thorough exam, review of findings. We go over it with the patient, assess them, and if it's something we can help with, then we do. It's a $345 exam. If they mention parasympathetic, they can get it for $67. But once you've identified the non-productive habits and you're actively rewiring your neuroplasticity, you're going to be way more successful. Jennifer, great question. So training yourself to breathe properly, that's a pattern too. One of the best drills that I like for it is if you put a hand on your chest and a hand on your belly and you take a really deep breath, try to breathe into your hand first and then have your chest rise. So you're trying to isolate your diaphragm as it pushes down into your belly. And this is something that you can do on a regular basis. A lot of meditation and yoga techniques will have you start and in your practice with this. 10 to 20 breaths will switch you into a parasympathetic state. There's also there's a brand called Core 360, and it's actually a belt that you can wear that has these little nodules inside that touch your diaphragm. And if you're lifting, if you're doing workouts and you use that belt, it makes sure that you're expanding your diaphragm. So breathing technique is something that is really, really worth examining. A lot of people also don't breathe very well when they sleep. There's a great book called Breath out there. It talks about the importance of nasal breathing. So you're starting to see more and more people talk about taping their mouth shut at night to encourage nasal breathing. Obviously, if there's a pre-existing breathing condition, that's not really a great idea, but it's something to consider trying also. So, sorry, I went on a tangent there. The goals, when you're kind of reestablishing them, try to start by setting yourself up for success. If, as I mentioned, like shopping intentionally, setting your environment up. One that I've talked to a few people about is if you're somebody who scrolls at nighttime, get a separate alarm clock and leave your phone in another room. Most of us only have our phone near us anyway because we're intending on using it as an alarm to wake up the next day. Just get rid of the problem. Get an alarm clock, a good old-fashioned one with batteries or that plugs into the wall. Put your phone in another room. That way you're not even tempted to use it. That's something to think about. But if you're giving all of these things a chance and you're examining all of this, your mental health is going to have a huge upswing. And it actually happens pretty dramatically for a lot of people. You'll notice your energy levels are higher, your sleep is better, your interpersonal relationships are better, you're having actual increased blood flow to your brain. So energy levels, cognizance, all of that gets better. And it's really something to consider looking at when you're taking your life as a whole and kind of examining it, because again, mental health just gets kind of dismissed a lot of the time, but it has such a huge trickle-down effect. And yeah, just give some of these things a try. If you have any questions, leave a comment below, or if you're one of our patients and you're nearby, you can reach out to me directly or one of the other doctors. We're happy to talk to you about this. If the person that you're thinking about while you watch this isn't local, by the way, let us know and we will help them find a chiropractor closer to them. That parasympathetic stimulation has huge health ramifications for a lot of people, particularly children and people who are under a lot of stress for a long period of time. So thank you for tuning in and joining us here. We really appreciate it. And again, I'm Dr. Mary with 4 Points Family Chiropractic, and I will see you next month where I will be talking more about inflammation.